10 years ago, I had brought in someone to run the company, and I sort of stepped out into a semi-retired role. So I had a chance sort of to read and reflect and think about what had gone on previously in my career. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, for a variety of reasons, I decided to step back into the business. So it was a chance to, I don't know if it's a second chance, but it's a chance to try some things that I'd thought about and had been reflecting on in terms of how to integrate faith and work. And I think one of the most important things for me was to see that the mission of the organization and the people in the organization were equally important. We had some challenges in terms of our business strategy, or even our business vision, and in terms of some of the financial results and some people issues. So I could have easily gone and just started cleaning house or doing a number of things, but I thought it was important to really bring in some additional outside resources to help me think through, what are the underlying issues in the organization that's led to these, what I would call blockages. And so I brought in some fairly non-traditional consultants. There are many business consultants who come in to help you with financial and business strategy. And I brought in some folks who had more of an interdisciplinary set of skills, including psychology and theology and organizational theory, and basically had them do a 360 evaluation of the organization to look at both individuals, look at the organizational culture, look at our business strategy, and sort of communally try to discern what are the real issues. Because I think sometimes, particularly somebody who's been a founder in the business and has some strong opinions about how things ought to be, come in with certain ideas about how to do things. And I think it was very helpful because they pointed out some things both about people and strategies that I was clearly blind to. And actually having that sort of communal discernment, being able to look at something together, I think was really helpful. And I think that was probably one of the most important strategic things I did in terms of stepping back in. In terms of where we are right now, last 3 or 4 years, we finished the process of sort of changing the direction of the organization, found a new leader to take it on to the next step. And actually, I'm now stepping out and am in the process of transferring the company to him. And sort of I'm stepping back now fully out, I think, of the life of the company. And I'll probably still play a board role, but not in any operational sense. I think the hardest part is not surprisingly, I think part of these kind of changes means some folks had to leave or had to go do something else. And I think that's always difficult. I think from a personal point of view, we have strong attachments. I've known most of the people for most of their career with us, and some of them I hired personally. So having to come to terms with that their time was at an end. It wasn't necessarily their fault, but it was just what needed to happen next. I think that was difficult. And I think another part that was difficult is I think I came into the business, when I stepped in, I had perhaps some naive views about my own ability to turn the business around from a financial point of view. And we were able to make some progress, but I had some fairly significant visions of growing the business in the time that I was going to spend in the business. And yet, very little of that happened. I think we stopped the bleeding, so to speak, but I think it wasn't like things took off like a rocket, which is sort of what I was hoping I could help bring into the business. What I found was most important in my role was actually to make the cultural and people investments that needed to be made so that the next leader could, in fact, now have that growth take place under his watch. In one sense, it was satisfying to have that happen. In another, there's probably an ego part of me that says, I wish it had been different, that I had more success in that way. I think the other thing that was a bit hard was I spent a lot of time, as part of making investments in people, creating a senior management team around me of 4 people that would help me in managing and leading the business. And as it turned out, I thought that it would be ideal if the 4 of them could take the business forward. It turned out that didn't work out. A couple of them had to and decided to leave, and one of the 4 turned out to be the leader, and one other person decided to stay and to play a support role. But there was a part of me, perhaps an idealistic part of me, that had wished that the whole team could have gone on together, and that didn't turn out to be the case. In terms of what was easy, I'm not sure anything was easy in terms of this experience. There's a part of this that's, I think, just the price of making these kind of investments and decisions. But I think what I found surprisingly easy was once the decision was made to turn this over, and once I felt like we had picked the right person to take on that role of being the president of the organization, it was remarkably easy to step back and to say, this is now your baby, go run with it. And I was actually a little surprised that I felt that way. I don't know if it was a combination of relief or just the joy of having someone take that next step. I don't think it's merely a matter of going and spending a lot of time in prayer for people. I mean, I think that's important. I think there are tools available for doing evaluations. There are these 360 evaluation tools that I think give you a way of looking at people's performance and capabilities in a fresh way. I think the folks that we brought in that were very helpful had some psychological instruments that were very helpful in identifying what they call the difference between people's capacities and people's competencies. And by that they meant competencies are things that you learn how to do well. And some people actually get good at doing things that they don't have the natural capacity to do. And so what happens, we found in our organization, there were some people doing jobs that they were actually good at. They learned how to do them, but it wasn't in their sweet spot in terms of who God has made them to be as human beings. And so for example, I had a guy who was my chief technical officer who was brilliant at creating software and was actually pretty good. He was a Christian. He was actually very good in managing people. But what was interesting, so I had to manage more people. We needed somebody who was a good manager, who was good relationally with people. But it turned out that his ability to do that drained him, that it was not how he was wired to be as the way God had made it. And I think, and what's interesting is that some of these psychological instruments that I became aware of helped you discern between what things are your competencies, the things that you do well, versus the things that you have natural God-given capacity to do. And that what's interesting too is if people spend a lot of time in their area of competency that are not their capacities, they get burned out. People wind up burning themselves out doing things that they are good at and that have some benefit to the organization, but in fact are not their long-term, so who they were meant to be. I think part of the job of evaluation is trying to help ourselves and the individuals to figure out, are they living in their sweet spot, or are they just doing a lot of things that they're good at, but they just aren't wired to go do. And I think even for the organization, that's a bad strategy because you're going to burn people out and find that people won't be able to carry on in the work that you have for them. It doesn't help the person to be in a role that they aren't good at and don't, in fact, ultimately find satisfaction in. So I think it's, even though people may not realize that, people may disagree about your own evaluation of how well they're doing, at the end of the day, the person who has the responsibility has to make that decision. And I think you make that as thoughtfully as you can, as prayerfully. I think you do, in a certain sense, carry the burden of that it's painful, and it should be painful to make a decision like that for anyone in your organization. It certainly has been for me.